intervened on behalf of
So my name is Michael Strong. I am many things. I started out as an education entrepreneur. I hate school and I love learning. Actually, I'm embarrassed to be in a classroom with desks because I want to puke anytime I see this sort of environment. But I create schools where people love learning, are happy, and learn a lot. Very high level, intense kind of learning, and very entrepreneurial, Socratic. After spending 15 years as an education entrepreneur, I met John Mackey of Whole Foods. He and I both believed in entrepreneurial solutions to world problems. Some libertarians are anti-tax, anti-regulation, and it's not about being against taxes, it's not about being against regulation, it's about allowing people to create better education, better grocery stores, better law, better governance, better food, better everything. And so, as a consequence of that, I've spent the last 10 years exploring entrepreneurial solutions to world problems, including innovative solutions in law, governance, finance, medicine, you name it. I know hundreds of really creative, interesting entrepreneurs who are solving problems, and if they were allowed to do so by government, we would be able to solve so many human problems so much more quickly. So, it's a good question as to whether or not we should be optimistic about a more free and voluntary society or not. I'm by nature optimistic, so I'll go with the optimism, although I acknowledge there are a lot of grounds for pessimism. But I think if we believe in it, and if we have a concrete, practical vision for getting there, we're much more likely to get there. So let me kind of chart out a couple of pathways for legitimate optimism. One is, I actually know somebody, a man named Dick Cornell, sort of pointed out how in some ways we are underthrowing the state. So rather than overthrow, which has violent connotations, he pointed out, to use a banal example, that the US Post Office, or post offices around the world, are becoming obsolete because of email, text, UPS, FedEx, and so forth. Right now, the Postal Service shuffles around immense amount of junk mail, and it's subsidized by governments to shuffle around junk mail. Meanwhile, all the action is gone. And so, of course, you could be annoyed at the fact that the Post Office, the world's largest civilian vehicle fleet, is killing trees unnecessarily, wasting gas, doing all sorts of things. But the good news is, we basically left behind. As an educator, I envision within a few decades we'll leave government schools behind. Legal systems, arbitration, online arbitration, we're going to leave much of the legal system behind. Finance, blockchain technology, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, we're going to leave establishment banking behind. So one comparison I have is rather than necessarily, as it were, completely withering away the state, I see at some point the state being kind of like the Queen of England. She costs a lot of money, she's kind of obsolete, some people still love her, but she doesn't do so much damage. So for me, before and at some point, her subsidies will go down and down and down, and the Queen of England will shrink in importance. So I see, instead of a rapid, we're going to have voluntarism, I see the state becoming this, big, hopefully benign cancer instead of a malignant cancer, as the rest of us escape to a better world. And hopefully more people will realize that the poor people need this most of all, that the state does the most damage to poor people. And as a consequence of that, we'll see more and more opportunities. To do another piece of this, Peter Thiel says, and I think it's brilliant, the future of freedom depends on how many jurisdictions we have around the world. Right now we have about 200. If it shrinks to 30, we're screwed. If it expands to 1,000, we're in pretty good shape. Jurisdiction competition is number one. And it may not be that we'll have absolutely perfect voluntarism in any, but if we have 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 jurisdictions, bright creative people are radically mobile now, and the bright creative people will go wherever they can have the best quality of life. Sea studying is another option. I used to be on the sea studying board. Let's create freedom at sea. As we have more opportunities to create a better world, we'll see change. Patri Friedman pointed out that the very existence of Hong Kong probably did more for freedom than all of his grandfather's works. And as much as I respect Milton Friedman, I agree, the fact of Hong Kong. So as we have increasingly healthy, free, voluntary jurisdictions around the world, and all of the world's bright, creative people are attracted to those jurisdictions, we'll see other jurisdictions slowly, lamely compete to improve things. So in terms of the focus on action versus, as it were, politics, I think we need to have practical, actionable items. Part of this is careers too. If people are, if people's only pathway to success is conventional institutions, whether it's universities or governments or whatever, the existing establishment will suck them all in. Conversely, if they see opportunities where even 5 or 10 years down the road, they could have interesting careers in new industries, whether it's private governance, private security, the whole world of blockchain, whatever, education, we'll see more and more people. What I want to do is to help bright, young, motivated, creative young people say, this is the path. We see a way where in 10, 15 years, we'll have really cool careers instead of the old dead establishment careers. And so the more we can get in that direction, the better. At the same time, we want to help people understand why the old dead hand is killing us all. Because with all of these projects, there's a constant danger that the forces of reaction will kill it. And so I celebrate every occasion on which there are little kind of pockets of freedom. Very, very, as it were, a small example, but there has been a movement towards food freedom in the US where people who want, say, to have unpasteurized milk will fight for the right to have unpasteurized milk. And so on the one hand you have, as it were, the entrepreneur of the unpasteurized milk, but then you also need kind of the activists to protect them from the attack. I proposed Native American tribes gaining sovereignty so they could create wonderful zones of healthcare freedom, for instance, and it's important to win that PR battle so that when the evil forces of the state want to cut down a place that's providing, say, better cancer care or, kidneys for people that urgently need them, the state doesn't come and shut it down. We want outrage when these great do-gooder entrepreneurs are changing the world. We want outrage. A little bit of that with the kind of Uber-Lyft thing, the sharing economy, where we've got enough young people like, what kind of idiots are stopping this? And that's kind of ideologically, that's what we want. We don't need to have everybody master all the nuances and details of every argument. No, we want people instinctively to feel, let's create a much better world for all, and what are these people thinking? In some ways, ridicule is more powerful than argument. Once people become a joke on the other side, we've won. And so it's almost a tonality thing. And part of this, one of the reasons I'm passionate about creating a vision for a better world is when people see, oh, you mean the state causes poverty, the state causes war, the state makes people, teen dysfunction. I attribute most of teen dysfunction to government schools. In traditional cultures, teens did not have this rebellious thing. They weren't addicted to drugs. Public health-wise, since the 1950s, we've seen more drug addiction, substance abuse, alcoholism, accidents, murder, suicides, eating disorders, and so forth. And a lot of this comes to a lack of meaning and purpose. So as an educator, I'm passionate about creating better schools that are high performance, enjoyable, but also you get a sense of meaning. And if you have a sense of meaning, you don't want to just go and get drunk all the time. I think the meaninglessness and boredom and terrible habits caused by schooling make people want to, let's just get out of this. And in every sector, we just need to create a positive world, have people realize the damage that's being done, then we need to do it and create careers for people doing it. So I've come a long ways. My parents were uneducated. My mom's a high school dropout. My dad, elevator repairman. So they had kind of no particular political perspective, but a bright kid growing up, I read the New York Times, New York Review of Books, Harper's Magazine, and I thought, of course, all good people were socialists, because in the early 1980s, all good people were socialists. I went to Harvard, and the range of political opinion was from hard Marxist to democratic socialist, and anybody outside that range was simply stupid and evil. Then I went to St. John's, where I studied the great book, Socratic Inquiry, for 4 years. I developed a deep interest in political philosophy on the one hand and philosophy of science. I had heard that these Chicago economists believed in free markets, which everybody knew were evil. So I went to the University of Chicago with my interest in philosophy of science and knowledge of the good democratic socialist state to see why the Chicago economists had become so wrong-headed. Within a couple of years, I realized I was clueless about economics. I ended up beginning a dissertation under Gary Becker on ideas and culture as human capital. I was depressed for 2 years when I realized that all of the socialist intellectuals I respected had misled me. They didn't even understand the economic arguments. Then I actually took an IHS summer seminar where for the first time I was introduced to the Austrian economics and anarcho-capitalism. Even studying economics at Chicago, I had never encountered Austrian econ, never encountered anarcho-capitalism. If nothing else, I thought, these are fascinating ideas. They might be wrong, they might be stupid, whatever, but really interesting. So Randy Barnett was at my seminar, and so I got to listen to Randy Barnett talk about ANCAP. I read David Friedman's Machinery for Freedom for the first time. I discovered Hayek. I became a big lover of Hayek. And I would say for the next decade, I was kind of working with Hayek's ideas. At this point, I was starting schools and outside of graduate school. But Chicago had got me from socialist to free market. Then I would say IHS got me thinking about Austrian and ANCAP. And it took me a decade to kind of work through those. And gradually, for me, the two blades of the scissors that are kind of overwhelming are public choice theory on one hand. Once you see how government works, it's hopeless. Not to put too fine a point on it, and there are nuances, but basically it's hopeless. And then Hayekian creativity. Hayek has a beautiful vision of ways in which there are opportunities all over. The analogy I like is neoclassical economics. The whole joke, if there's a $100 bill on the ground, the economists wouldn't pick it up because it can't exist. Perfect markets. I believe that in a Hayekian world, we're wading knee-deep in opportunity, and there are cool opportunities everywhere, all over the place to be discovered. And the regulatory state and rent-seeking is actively destroying most of those. Part of that came from my experience as an educator, where I wanted to create schools where people could have better lives, and the government was attacking me all over. One case, I co-created a charter school in Angel Fire, New Mexico, where we were having great success, and then the school district hired an out-of-state or an out-of-district inspector to shut us down over the weekend. They came on a Friday and said, you're not in compliance. It turns out that our toilet roll holder was a few inches, just stupid stuff. Later we got dinged by the state for having not the right number of files in our file folders. So I have direct experience with the inanity of bureaucracy, and the fact that you're doing good work is perfectly irrelevant to them. The regulatory machinery, which is supported by rent-seeking cronies, is an ugly machine that will destroy any opportunity. And I saw all of these cool things that people could do. One of my favorite articles is Everything I Want to Do is Illegal by Joel Salatin. He did a book version. And he points out all the kinds of ways in which he could create a healthy, active, organic farm where teens could work, but most of it is illegal. To have processed meat on his own land is illegal. To have teens working in certain ways is illegal. To have certain facilities in certain ways is illegal. Actually, as an educator, I wanted to have a student do an internship. She's super motivated, and of course now unpaid internships are for all practical purposes illegal. So I see the state actively destroying the work I'm doing, the work other good people are doing, and nobody even knows it. So I want to do a paradigm shift because I think viscerally, we evolved in tribes of 150 where it was appropriate to be altruistic. I'm an altruist, and if we're all altruists and you're a jerky free rider, we want to get on your case. So we have this instinctive thing to go after the selfish person. That's appropriate in a small tribe. But as Hayek makes the case, in a large nation state, that same impulse misleads us radically. We really need the freedom to create, because the freedom to create is massively more valuable to the human spirit than is temporary vindictive attacks on the selfish. Yes, they're greedy jerks in capitalism. Hate them. Donald Trump is an asshole. But that's not what it's about. It's about the spectacular innovations, not about chasing the assholes. Sometimes I describe myself as a communitarian libertarian because I care passionately about community. So the schools I create are really warm, rich communities. I like living in community. I like the idea of intentional communities. I like places, urban areas that are safe and healthy to walk in. So for me, the entrepreneurial opportunity is to create better communities where young people are raised up in healthier ways, where they have more positive experiences. In many ways, all of the things the left cares about. I even describe myself as a libertarian who half loves Scandinavia, because I think they do get some things right. And I would see private jurisdictions that outdid, Denmark and Holland in many respects in the way they care for their people. I often joke that in some ways, Utah is like or the Mormons are like a private version of, Norway. About the same population, they take care of their people and so forth. But the Mormons are kind of private. I don't share their theology, but they do care about their people. There's a sense of community. So for me, the big opportunity is to create higher quality community in which people are more healthy and well. To kind of go back to the Socratic issue, I think ultimately so there's top-down education where, filling a pail, lighting a fire. But the best way I've found to light fires and really get people going is to have them exposed to lots of ideas. Also, it turns out that, so there are three things we do in the Socratic approach that I love, one of which is read difficult texts. I think discussing ideas is really interesting. I think all of us love ideas. That's where we are. I came from the working class. When I go to inner city schools, most of these kids have no idea about discussing ideas. It's almost like an alien language, and yet it's the ultimate tool to social mobility and career success. Once you're, as it were, fluent in discussing ideas, then you can think creatively about entrepreneurial projects. You can compare different worldviews. You can look at different places. But conventional education, it's almost entirely filling a pail. It's almost entirely passive. John Taylor Gatto, New York State Teacher of the Year, describes conventional education as 12 years of training in passivity and dependence. And that's exactly right. Kids are systematically trained how to be passive and dependent. And it's the worst thing we could do to young people. So active learning in general, entrepreneurial projects, but also the Socratic intellectuality, so that we need to understand each other. Think about have our mind on fire. There's a biography of Ralph Waldo Emerson called Mind on Fire. And that's what I want. I want all of my students to be wildly amazed in thought. And ultimately, I think that leads to creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Because if you've been a passive recipient of top-down learning your whole life, you'll never become a creator. And especially with automation and low-cost wage around the world outsourcing, all of the good jobs in the future will go to creators, innovators, and entrepreneurs. Anything that can be done by a machine or robot absolutely will. Some people think everything can, but I think there's a realm of the human, and the realm of the human will be ever more focused on that which it's going to be really tough. Maybe someday the robots will take over, but I think there's certain things where it's going to be really tough for automation to do, and some of that is, all of that is creative and it's interpersonal. So I see this as how do we help people become whole, fully developed human beings where they can be distinctively humans in ways that are valuable to other human beings and not be replaced by the robots. One other kind of riff while I'm on this, I'm a big fan of the notion of the experience economy, where people are not really buying products and services. People want experiences. So how do we create an economy where what we're doing all day, every day, is we're engaged in creative value creation such that we're creating better and better experiences for each other all day, every day. If we can do that, then yes, robots and automation, but we'll create richer social experience, communal experience, educational experiences, recreational experiences. My favorite definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who stays awake at night thinking about what sucks and how to fix it. There are a lot of things that suck. Being in traffic sucks, so there are now buses in San Francisco which are designed like coffee shops where you have your laptop, your couch. It's really beautiful and comfortable and it smells good. It's not a stinky, ugly bus. If that sucks, they fix it. Another example of what sucks, we wake up to a noisy alarm in the morning, so now you can have alarm clocks that are very gentle, becoming louder, light, smells. You can have an alarm clock that makes coffee when you wake up. You can even have an alarm clock that cooks bacon while you wake up. Whatever sucks, let's fix it. And so many things suck. If we had a purely voluntary world, we would reduce things like child abuse, we would reduce things like rape, I see structuring the world right legally, and a lot of that is creating a voluntary system, will provide countless ways in which creative entrepreneurs will address the most horrible social problems. It's a long, complicated path. One example is, common law legal system is in many ways an entrepreneurial legal system. Different people can write different contracts. If we're free to write whatever contract we want, including whatever marriage contract, whatever divorce contract, initially some will be really bad, but over time you practice, you get better, you iterate. The first computers were crappy. With all of this, it's a matter of letting the entrepreneurial ecosystem experiment, and gradually we'll get better and better at everything. Sometimes I kind of joke that we all know that technology's gotten cheaper, but I'll call it Strong's law, that entrepreneurial capitalism, when allowed to do so, always creates higher quality, lower cost, and more granular satisfaction of human needs. And that will include with respect to law, governance, community, education, health. So if we want less child abuse, we need to create entrepreneurial communities that will offer environments with lower cost, higher quality, more granular means of addressing those needs. I can't write the whole pathway right now, but I think there are reasons to really start considering ways in which, if we allow this entrepreneurial ecosystem to do it, humanity will be on a path towards much happier health and well-being for all.
What's social entrepreneurship?
In many ways, sometimes I do describe myself as a left libertarian, although there's some left libertarians who seem to believe in the labor theory of value, which I think is ridiculous. But other than that, I am very much coming from the left, but using market means to that extent left libertarian. Sometimes I say communitarian libertarian. And it is odd, certainly I see both social entrepreneurship and conscious capitalism as in perfect continuity with that. Some people defend capitalism on the notion that we should all be allowed to get as rich as possible. Again, to pick on Donald Trump, I think just getting rich is stupid and boring. I'm a great believer in Maslow's hierarchy, but once you have your basic physical needs met and then your basic, social and esteem needs met, at some point it's all about self-actualization. So for me, I think that we're going to see more and more people who really want to self-actualize, who want to live interesting, fulfilling lives. And their entrepreneurial creativity and whatever money they make from it is almost incidental to that. We actually see, I think, a lot of tech entrepreneurs in new economy, not all, but a certain portion of them going in that direction. So for me, the ultimate end game for humanity is not about more capitalism, so you have more rich people with more yachts. That's stupid. It's about how we have more people. Ultimately, I want 7 to 8 billion, however many we have, people being creative, entrepreneurial, in a state of flow, all day, every day, satisfying each other's needs and having a great time doing it. And that's the path to happiness. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who is a leading happiness researcher, describes 3 sources of happiness. One is pleasure. I like the fact that he admits pleasure is good. Nothing wrong with pleasure. But the second is flow, being engaged in creative activity. And the third is a sense of meaning and purpose. Elie Wiesel has written really eloquently on this. And so, pleasure, I think capitalism's doing a pretty good job, not perfect, of providing us with pleasures, but that's out there. Flow state, be engaged in creative, positive work. Some people have wonderful jobs, but we want people in creative flow states all day, every day. And then, or almost, not perfect, and then meaning and purpose. If we know we're making the world a better place, and this is social entrepreneurship, conscious capitalism, then we love what we do. And I have a blast working in the schools I create. I love working with kids, and a lot of people do. So I think once we acknowledge that, okay, maybe there's some people who want the big yachts, and as long as they're not causing harm, let them get rich and have big yachts. I'm not going to stop anybody. But I think many of us want to have fun doing good. So we just need to create a world, and it's a voluntary world where more of us, and ultimately most of us, have fun doing good. So a concrete path towards the creation of that voluntary world. I'll call it startup cities, but I'm going to back up to talk about special economic zones. Most people interested in policies ignore the fact of free zone special economic zones. Bill Easterly, the development economist, once came to a small conference I created, and he admitted development economists had simply ignored them. Meanwhile, special economic zones have led to greater prosperity and greater economic liberalization in China, India, Mexico, Ireland, Mauritius, South Korea, Taiwan, and elsewhere. You start off with a zone where you have reduced taxes and regulations that attracts some investment. Not always. There's a whole issue of crony capitalist special economic zones, which are bad, but at least some of them have worked out. The next stage of zone was created in Dubai, when Dubai, a little over 10 years ago, created the Dubai International Financial Center. And what was distinctive about that zone was that it implemented a new legal system. So it wasn't merely reduced taxes and regulations. It was actually a different legal system. Dubai is in the UAE. They have Sharia law. They wanted to create a financial center. They knew that you're not going to attract Goldman Sachs and Citibank if you have Sharia law. Being very pragmatic, they said, well, let's get the world's best financial system, legal system. So they hired a British commercial law judge, London, the financial capital of the world, hired him to administer British common law on 110 acres, and voila, you had a little piece of different law. Most people wouldn't recognize that as ANCAP, but I say once you have, in essence, the rulers of Dubai entrepreneurially creating a new legal system of 110 acres by hiring a judge to administer different law within their country, that's pretty cool. That's on the path. And so then Honduras a few years ago passed legislation allowing zones with different legal systems as well. Many development economists, most development economists will acknowledge that institutions are the keys to prosperity. The South Korea, North Korea example, East Germany, West Germany. Bad legal institutions result in poverty, good legal institutions result in prosperity. So a poor country like Honduras, they really want to attract investments, create jobs. Their people are poor and miserable. So let's be practical, just like the rulers of Dubai was. Once you see more poor countries, and I've got people around the world now asking me about how to do this. Once more poor countries realize, oh, if we just create a zone with a different legal system and make it credible, we can attract capital, talent, and so forth, and create jobs and prosperity for our citizens. I see the next stage as going from the old special economic zones to these zones with distinctive legal systems run by entrepreneurs who have distinctive expertise or hire the best expertise in law, in governance, in security, in all the systems that used to be thought of as government institutions. Very practical example that already exists. Sandy Springs, Georgia is a place outside of Atlanta where a few years ago the city of Atlanta was encroaching upon it. It had been unincorporated. They realized their best defense against Atlanta would be to incorporate, but they didn't want to have an expensive city government. So they created a government where they outsourced almost all city functions. They had a city of over 100,000 people with about 3 city employees, and everything else was outsourced. Very practical. They're proven systems. Almost everything that governments do, private entities have done somewhere around the world. So we've already got most of the expertise. It's a matter of taking these old, obsolete legacy systems, allowing entrepreneurs to create the best and the brightest, or create the most functional versions of these systems. Then you can have prosperity and well-being in Honduras, Nigeria, Cambodia, wherever. Really, it's just a kind of mind shift, and we've got most of the experience, technology, and expertise in place to start making this happen within the next 20 years.
Right now, nation states are protected by, or they're coercively funded and protected by armies. It makes me nervous thinking about these free cities in the middle of nation states. How would a free city protect itself from outside forces?
Well, many people are concerned about the question of defense. I would say, first of all, at present, the United States is basically the global hegemon. Maybe Russia and China would put up a fight against us, but a tiny country like Honduras does whatever the U.S. tells it to. Honduras military is not much, and most developing countries are in this status. So, just very pragmatically, when people are concerned about, aren't you concerned the Honduran government will shut you down? No, we're much more concerned about the U.S. government. Because most of the world, if the U.S. government wants to shut you down, it will. And nobody is going to have a military force to stop the U.S. government. Maybe Russia and China, but certainly no small independent state is going to have to stand a chance. So I think in the next phase of this, and really for 100 years, maybe 50 years, but for the next phase, the key limitation on these jurisdictions will be they have to be acceptable to the US government. I think the best path, and again I'm pragmatic rather than ideological, the US government is concerned about terrorism around the world, as well as refugees and so forth. If we can demonstrate that these startup cities can address these issues and create peace and prosperity in places where there's currently fear of all sorts of things going on, then the US government will allow us to do them. On the other hand, something like financial regulation or money laundering, substances, illegal substances, narcotics, we have to be US compliant. That's just one of the conditions, very pragmatic. One of the reasons that I prefer to focus on the entrepreneurial creation of entrepreneurial solutions to world problems, and then the entrepreneurial creation of law governance. Law governance community is very important to me. Education, well-being, entrepreneurial creation of happiness and well-being. Is that if one starts talking about voluntarism or anarchism or libertarianism, they all feel like ideologies. And if we have 1,000 communities, there may be some entrepreneurial communities that are communes. There may be some very deeply religious ones. There may be some that are theocracies. For me, as long as people voluntarily choose where they want to live, I love Leonard Read's book, Anything That's Peaceful. As long as people are not initiating violence, I don't care what they do. There's some tricky issues around children and so forth, and at some point we'll have a network where we have to address at what point do you initiate force against somebody who's abusing a child? And I can imagine, I pointed out, if there was a seastead that was abusing children, even if it's in international waters with no law, somebody's going to take them out, and most of the world will celebrate the fact that they were taken out, even though that's initiating force. But for the most part, most people, when you allow them to be free from initiating force, they will do good things, positive things. And the more quickly we focus on entrepreneurial solutions to the most important parts of human life, the faster we'll make the world better. It's a huge tragedy, a nightmarish tragedy. But most people who care, most heartfelt people, support the state, and they don't realize that by supporting the state, they're supporting ongoing poverty, war, misery that is completely unnecessary. From in 1800, almost everybody in the world was poorer than the poorest African today. Now, 1 billion people have a pretty decent standard of living. Another 1 billion people are rapidly getting to one. If we can allow for social technologies that can innovate as fast as physical technologies have innovated, I suspect that we can see the 21st century be one where within 100 years we can be happier beyond our wildest dreams. And I want people to get excited about this, get on board, and figure out ways to make this happen. So I would start with my book, where I'm lead author, Be the Solution, How Entrepreneurs and Conscious Capitalists Can Solve All the World's Problems. I have a new book coming out, tentatively titled Blind Spot, Why Entrepreneurial Value Creation is Invisible in Academia. And part of that is, I think, academics, sadly, are most behind the ball in terms of recognizing this world of possibility. I have a website called Radical Social Entrepreneurs, Cabelli Strong Incubator, and I would say follow me on Facebook, and I'm constantly cranking out new stuff. I'm going to be writing, speaking, and talking about this nonstop for the rest of my life. And I welcome as many people as possible helping me make this happen.